So my name is Laura Emsley, and I'm an artist, and I have been invited to come and do a short residency here at the university at the invitation of Angelica Madeira, and I am very excited to be here, and I'm going to be doing some workshops and some talks next week. And my practice is based a lot on travel, and so in some ways this is also a kind of an extension of my practice to be here. So my background was in painting, so I started off as a painter. So I had quite a lot of education and skills built up around painting. So when I started wanting to make things in other mediums, because I found it quite limiting just doing the painting, I had to learn a whole lot of new skills which I hadn't had before, and that's been quite difficult, and I kind of wish that I had had more of that when I had been studying, but it was also very exciting, and I'm still learning all the time when I'm working. It is quite hard to work across the mediums because you have to become quite skilled in all of them, so that's quite difficult. So deep time is really just thinking about time in very large portions and understanding that our presence within time is so insignificant. So it's really about going right back. First of all, for me, the important deep times are thinking about the beginnings of humans. When did we arrive in time as humans? And then in even greater time, back into the beginning of the earth and back into the beginning of the universe, and then that leads you right back into notions about, well, what is time? So yeah, I think it's in all its expansiveness. So I was actually asked to do a project, and in fact the project was about the 2010 Football World Cup in South Africa. And I was asked to do the project in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And they wanted some connection between football and South Africa. So I didn't know much about football, but I started thinking about the foot. And I remembered that there was this fossil in South Africa where it showed the change between the ape foot to the human foot, and he's called Littlefoot, and I always wanted to make a work about Littlefoot. So I was invited to go and do that. I got a big residency with UNESCO to go and do that, and I went to see this little fossil, Littlefoot, and I had a very life-changing experience, very existential, powerful experience in my visit to this hominid who is something like 30,000 years old, possibly older. So for me it was like a time machine, and the experience of time was such a shock. And so I've just been completely fascinated by that ever since. When I started making art, this difficulty of having to begin somewhere comes up. You have to begin to make something. And I found it very difficult. How do you begin to make something? And I started thinking about beginnings, and that in art we also always have to look to the past to make a beginning. So you start with looking backwards, and then you work forwards from there. So I thought, well, you know, I could look to the modernists, or I could look to the Renaissance, but why stop there? So I thought it would be interesting to rather just go back as far as I could and to think about the very beginnings of art. And of course the very beginnings of art are associated deeply with caves. I had a lot of experiences in caves as a child, so that was always fascinating for me and interesting for me. I got drawn back to them. So that was the initial reason to go back to the caves. So this is a project I did in Norway, and the word Gnangagap comes out of Norse mythology, and it means the void. And the void, which also connects to the caves, because the caves are voids, is the place where these differences between things disappear. You have a void, and when you go into it, the world starts to kind of disappear and rearrange itself. So that was part of the exploration. There was a cave in Norway that I went to, and it was related to mythologies that were also connected to trolls. And I started to look into the troll myths, and I began to realize that they sounded very like Neanderthals. And so I thought about whether the trolls could really be ancient stories of human encounters with Neanderthals that have been passed down throughout time, and actually they are really stories about Neanderthals. So I started to get interested in Neanderthals and really have a look at them closely, and came to understand that actually the Neanderthals did not disappear, because we are all, speaking about myself as a European, Europeans all have some Neanderthal genes. So we interbred with the Neanderthals. So the notion of self and other becomes very disturbed, because in fact I am not a pure Homo sapien. I am partly a Neanderthal. And in fact we are discovering more and more that Homo sapiens are not a kind of pure species, that we interbred with many different kinds of hominids. We overlapped with hominids at different times. So that was the interest for me there. So I filmed, I used hair extensions that everybody uses now, these kind of wigs to kind of indicate trolls, because trolls are also said to be very hairy, and they're also fantasy creatures, and they appear in our kind of digital era. So I was drawing on all these different references, and I used these wigs and filmed these wigs. And the way I filmed it was that the camera's behind, and you can't actually tell whether you're following this wig, this troll, or whether you are the troll, or whether you and the troll are being watched by a third party. So it's a confusion between which one you are, and then you come to understand that actually you are all three. Because we are the trolls. The trolls are a kind of extension of ourselves, and the trolls are literally genetically part of us. So Neanderthals, trolls, and Homo sapiens are all part of the same single thing. Is not a single thing. We are not single things. So that's how it's presented as a video, in which the three characters kind of converge into this one video. It's very interesting for me from this perspective. There's lots of similarities. I mean, obviously the combination of a kind of colonial history plus a kind of more indigenous groups of people is very strong and very powerful. And the kinds of debates and conflicts and difficulties that brings up in the present are also very similar. Issues around violence are also, there's a lot of similarity there. But also this sort of sheer vibrancy of the place, and the feeling of being alive in it, and the intensity of it, and the absolute beauty of it, and craziness of it, and the dark side of it as well, all mixed up. I always feel when I'm in South Africa as if I'm in heaven and hell at the same time, and it's a bit like that here too. It's kind of these very opposite extremes. It makes one exist in a very intense way. I haven't been here long, but I've been very impressed. I'm absolutely amazed at the standard. I think it's an incredibly high quality of what's going on here. I haven't seen anybody who's not committed and making strong work, which is very unusual. I find the engagement of the students fantastic. The concentration levels are amazing. I don't know why, but it's quite extraordinary. And I find it all very moving and very powerful. And it has a kind of a sense of urgency and realness about it, which I really like. And I think the campus is great. So it's a really beautiful campus. The facilities here are amazing. They're much better than, for instance, the universities in London, where you have much less space, much less facility, much less technical stuff. So I think it's really fantastic.